Are we rolling? Right, welcome to St Mary's Secret Garden. My name is Mark Patterson, and today I'm going to show you how to make a sustainable Christmas wreath. So today we've got materials that we've bought in advance. We've gone to a local flower market and bought locally harvested materials, but we've also supplemented them with things we foraged ourselves. So I've been around the garden this afternoon. I've picked some choice here, evergreen choice here, some flowers on it. We've got some Fatsia japonica flowers here, it's a relative of ivy. We've got some winter flowering viburnum flowers, which will give your wreath a nice wet smell if you're going to hang it indoors. We've got some cotoneaster that we've picked from the garden. We've got locally sourced holly with red berries, conifer foliage, and we've also got some ivy with ivy berries and flowers on it. And we've also got variegated ivy, which I've just picked from the side of the building outside, and we've got some euonymus, which is a nice evergreen plant as well. And the wreath rings we're using they're metal plastic free wreath ring. It's entirely biodegradable. It's just straw and blown moss tied together with natural thread. To start off our wreath, we're going to take a long piece of string. This is sisal string. It's made from fibres from an agave plant, so it's again natural, fully biodegradable. We're going to tie our piece of string around our wreath ring, tie that down, make a little knot, simple knot, like that. So we have our wreath ring like that on a long piece of string, and then what we're going to do is we're going to get some bits of conifer foliage, and we're going to hold them all at the thick end, put it against our wreath, just next to where we've tied our bit of string around, like that. And we're going to wrap the string around the foliage, through the ring, and we're going to do that all the way around the wreath. And you're going to keep adding more bits of conifer to it, and you want to add all the thick ends into the thin ends that you last tied on. So all the ends want to face the same way, so we don't see the thick, unsightly cut stems.
How's you doing that, Mark? The reason for Christmas wreaths.
So the origins of Christmas wreaths go back thousands of years, well before Christianity. So if you think about ancient times in Britain and other parts of Northern Europe, in winter it'd be dark, it'd be gloomy, it'd be cold. People didn't have the luxury of hot baths and showers. They might have a hot bath during the summertime. They probably wouldn't have a hot bath in winter. Particularly in northern climates where water would be frozen for most of the winter, so there would be liquid water to have a bath. And it would take an awful lot of firewood to heat enough water to have a bath in. So people wouldn't bathe very often in winter, and by the time of the winter solstice, the home might be starting to get a bit smelly. The people will be smelling themselves. We didn't have deodorants and things like that. They would use spices and herbs and rub spices and herbs on themselves and put dried hay and things in their bedding to try and spruce up the house and make it smell a bit fresher. But it could get quite stinky in the house, and also they didn't have fridges back then, so to preserve their food, they would slaughter the surplus animals in the fall, and they'd preserve meat and preserve other foodstuffs by rubbing salt into it. But despite drying things out and rubbing salt into it, by time of winter solstice, things again would be getting quite smelly, pungent. So to spruce up the house, they would bring greenery, fresh greenery, inside to try and mask the sour odours in the house. And there was also some religious and spiritual aspects to wreaths as well. So originally wreaths would have just been a bunch of greenery that would just be hung up, tied up at the thick ends and hung from the wall of the house. And then later on they evolved into a round shape. This was more to Christianity. The wreath represents the crown of thorns on Christ's head. But in terms of religious aspects, spiritual aspects of the wreath, they believed that wreaths were good, or would sort of fended off bad spirits and sort of goblins and things, all sorts of things like that. They believed that the evergreen plants that they made the wreaths from were magic. Because they didn't die like the other trees, but they don't lose their leaves. They stay green all year round. So they believed they were magic. And the evergreen foliage represented, the holly and the conifer represented immortality and health and things like that. The berries on a lot of the plants that they would bring in represented new life and rebirth and fertility, because they're the seeds of the plant where new plants grow from. So there was lots of religious and sort of spiritual things going on with the wreath. And they believed that things like dried orange slices and apple slices on your wreath represented the winter sun, and so that was the sort of offering to the sun gods, and we were, basically hoping for the return of spring and warm weather and the return of the sun. So they would often put sort of dried fruits and things on the wreath for that reason. And things like ivy, which we have here. Ivy, as it climbs up the tree, it sort of winds around the tree branch. That represented entwinement and entanglement and sort of marriage and relationships and the bonds of sort of relationships. And those relationships would be really important in winter when, during hard, lean times, the comfort of one's family was really important. So ivy was a significant thing on a wreath because it represented all the bonds of family and marriage and relationships and things like that. So we wrap our evergreen foliage around our wreath, so we have it covered in material like this. And then what we're going to do is we're going to decorate it with some ivy, holly and other things. So we've got some ivy here, so I'm going to take some of this ivy and I'm just going to sort of snip it into smaller bits that's more manageable to put into my wreath. And I'm going to push them into the ivy stems into the strings, existing strings on my wreath, the same direction that the conifer foliage is facing on the wreath, so everything's facing the same direction and it looks nice and neat. And you can just tuck the ends in to the conifer stems so you don't see them. So I'm going to put some ivy in there like that. Ivy in. I've got a bit of variegated ivy here, which I've foraged from outside. I'm going to put some of that on here as well. So I'm just going to.
So is there many bylaws with nature?
So if you, most local woods and commons and things like that, you could go to them and you could pick small quantities. You could forage small quantities of greenery for personal usage. So commons, your local woods, public owned spaces, you can generally go and forage things legally in small quantities. What you can't do is pick huge quantities for if you're making wreaths to sell, that would be commercial, that would be against the law. So it is always best to check with landowners' permission first. because some local authority woodlands, if it's a nature reserve and it's protected, they might have banned foraging because they're trying to preserve the ecosystem. So it is worth checking, but generally speaking, you can pick small quantities legally. It's always a good idea not to take too much material from any one plant, so you don't damage the plant. You don't want to sort of take tons and tons of berries, for example, because that would deprive food to birds and things. You've got to be sensible about it. But as long as you're sensible about it and respectful of the environment, it's usually permitted. So I'm going to put some ivy there. I'm going to put a bit of ivy on this side as well. Took a bit of ivy on that side. And then let me see what else have we got. Got some nice bits of got some nice.
I guess this is a much more sustainable way rather than the false plastic decoratives that actually cause more damage, more pollution.
Yeah, a lot of the wreaths you buy in the supermarkets and garden centres these days have got a metal framework or plastic. They use lots of wire, metal wire in it, which is not sustainable. They're not easy to recycle. A lot of the ribbons on them are like polyester and synthetic sort of materials. We're using a natural, they're using satin. It's a satin ribbon we've got, which is it's derived from a natural product. So we've got our bits of green there. But let me see what we'll stick on next. We'll put some holly on. So we've got some nice, vibrant, fresh holly here. We'll put some holly. So we'll snip some bits of holly off. Like that. I'm going to take a few little leaves off the bottom, just so that I've got a bit of bare stalks. I've got somewhere to sort of anchor that in, and I'll put a bit of holly here, I think.
So during COVID, obviously nature doesn't wait. How have you found nature has been since the lockdown and COVID? You've done some moth monitoring and monitoring of birds.
Yeah, so I think the birds and some of the wildlife has really benefited from the lockdown because the city's been a lot quieter and there's been a lot less disturbance. So wildlife that is always in the city but hard to see because it's often elusive and shies away from all the hustle and bustle, have been a lot bolder and coming out into the open a lot more. So I don't think there's more wildlife than we normally have. I think it's just been easy to spot. Because also the bird song's been a lot more noticeable this year in the city because there hasn't been so much traffic. You can hear the bird song. I'm up on the Narrow roof on a weekly basis during the spring and summer, and I've noticed a big difference in the bird song. You can actually hear the birds singing this year for the first time in years. You can hear all the little blackbirds and robins and things singing their hearts out from the rooftops, which normally you don't hear that well because it's all drowned out by the noise of the traffic below. And also the airplanes flying overhead, there's a lot less air traffic in the sky, so you can hear things because there's not the noisy airplanes coming over every 30 seconds.
So less noise pollution, light pollution?
Less noise pollution, less light pollution, yeah. So you've been noticing wildlife a lot more. I don't think there's more wildlife, I think it's just more noticeable because you can see it and you can hear it a lot easier.
So you've actually created more habitat up on the rooftop.
Yeah, we've been doing lots of work on the roof at the mirror this year, creating more habitat. Been doing some more soil mounds for bees to nest in, slaughtered bees to nest in, and we've been doing putting more bird boxes and nest boxes things up. And some of the bird boxes we put up last winter got used this year. I'm not sure which species used them, but we found nesting materials in them in the autumn, so they were definitely used over the summer. So I'm just going to try and...
So you've planted some... Now's the time to start looking at the soil and looking to plant. what bulbs have you planted to help with nature this year?
So some of the best bulbs for planting for bees and pollinators are things like muscari, which is grape hyacinths, little tiny blue hyacinths. They're not native, but they're really good for early pollinators, bumblebee queens and things, hairyfoot flower bees like them, and honeybees will use them as well. And they're really cheap and inexpensive to buy, and they're quite tolerant of a wide variety of soil types. So they're quite easy to grow. They're a really good one to plant for pollinators. But I've also been planting things like squill, which is it's like a little tiny bluebell looking flower, and squill is quite a good one for bees and things as well. So it's a bit of ivy berries there. So we're now getting it quite well covered in greenery. I'm now going to use a few things that I've foraged from the garden outside. So I've got some lovely viburnum here. I'm going to put a bit of viburnum in there. Smells really sweet. So if you put this on your front door, you're going to get this lovely heavenly sweet smell as you come out your front door. I'm just going to poke that into there. I think that will look quite nice there. It's quite a subtle pale pinky colour. I'm going to take the leaves off because the leaves will dry out and go brown. I'm just going to take the leaves off because what we really want is the flowery bits.
So the flowers, to grow those flowers, what would people need to do? You know, if we wanted to be as sustainable as possible and utilise the resources around us, how would we?
Well, there's lots of plants that you can grow in your garden that you can use in a wreath. So we're using mostly traditional wreath materials, conifer, holly, ivy. But you can also use things like choicia, which is Mexican orange. Lots of people grow this in their gardens. It's grown nearly every council car park, sort of shopping centre car park has choicia growing in it. You can use that. You can use euonymus, which is also grown in lots of amenity spaces. You know, most industrial estates and shopping centres and things have this growing in the car parks. Lots of people grow it in our gardens. You often see it in window boxes and things as well. You can use that. That's quite easy to grow. It's a sort of dwarf, quite a compact little shrub. Put some of that in. Comes in lots of different colours. You get silvery coloured foliage. You get green. You can get yellow. You can get all different colours. You know, you can use things like painted laurel as well, which lots of people grow in their gardens. It's often grown on housing estates and shopping centres again, places like that. So I'm going to push some of these Mexican orange. It's a Mexican orange in. This is going to. They've got the nice little white flowers on it. These you could use these as a sort of alternative to a traditional Christmas rose, which are expensive to buy. But they also have quite a pleasant smell. Mexican orange. It's got sort of citrusy smell, so you can just push them in. So we've got a bit of colour on there. Let me see, what else have I got? I've got some Cotoneaster berries. I've got two types of Cotoneaster. I've got a low-growing prostrate Cotoneaster. I've got a large shrubby tree type Cotoneaster, and these again often grown on housing estates and around shopping centre car parks and places like that. You can quite easily pick small quantities of this to put on your wreath. So I'm just going to attach that, then push it into one of the existing bits of string, hold it on, get some of this larger Cotoneaster there, just snip a small piece off. Put a piece of that on with some leaves. Need a bit more red on this side to balance it out a bit, so I'll stick a bit in there.
Amazing, Mark. A wreath in 20 minutes.
Right, and then to finish it off, what we could do, we've got some bits of snowberry here. Snowberry is a non-native invasive plant. It was brought up by the Victorians and was very popular in gardens, and in the 80s lots of it got planted in around playgrounds and council car parks and just public green spaces. And it started to become a bit of an invasive pest because the blackbirds love the berries. Blackbirds eat the berries, and then they poop the berries out all over the place, and they sprout into new bushes, and it produces rhizomes, and it kind of forms a big clump and it can outcompete native plants. If it gets into woodlands, it can do a lot of damage in sort of native woodlands. So it's fine to grow in your garden, but it's not a plant you want to really plant in sort of like wild areas. It can be a bit of a pest. Berries are mildly toxic, so you've got to be careful that children don't eat the berries. But they are very festive looking and they look quite good on the wreath. So you could stick some of these on the wreath. I'm going to put some of these in at the top here. So I'm going to pop those in there. So that's a bit of colour, and then to finish it off, because we're getting quite busy now, we don't want your wreath to look too busy, what we'll do is we'll put some pine cones on there. So I'm going to take a piece of string, a piece of our sisal string, about 10 or 12 inches long, cut that there, and you're going to take your pine cone, and your pine cone's made up of a series of scales and they're flexible. What you want to do is you want to wrap your string around the cone, weaving it into the pine cone's scales, like that, and then you can then tie that onto your wreath. So I'm going to tie this one onto there, I think. So I'm just going to try and, without prickling myself on the holly berries, I'm going to try and get that bit of string around there. Like that. Turn it round and tie that in. I'm just going to snip off those extra bits of string so they're not in the way. So put the pine cone on there. Here. You want to tie your wreath quite tight because what you don't want is for it to fall to bits, and as it dries out the foliage will shrink. If you don't tie it really tightly, as the foliage shrinks, bits of it might start to fall out, so you want to tie it on quite tight. And then, so we've got quite a lot in there now. We'll finish off decorating it with some bits of cinnamon and some orange peel. So oranges, ideally use a needle and thread them on, but if not, just use a pair of scissors, make a slight hole in your orange or your apple slices, put your bit of sisal string through there. There's the hole. And then tie those onto your wreath. Trying to hide the strings behind my bits of ivy. So we've got all bits of orange peel there, and then we're going to put on some dried chilies. Not that traditional, but they're nice and red. Do wash your hands after handling chilies because they're very hot. One thing you do want to do is go to the toilet and touch yourself immediately after handling chilies because they are very hot. So wash your hands after the chilies. I speak from experience. It's not very pleasant. Yeah, so avoid touching your hands, face, nose. Yeah, hands, face, space type rules when you're having chilies because they are very hot and will annoy your skin if you don't wash your hands after handling them. So some chilies in there. And then we're going to put some cinnamon sticks on. So cinnamon is the bark of a tree. And you'll all know what cinnamon is because we use it in cakes and things a lot. So we've given you some three lengths of ribbon in your wreath pack. You've got red, you've got silver and gold. And I think should we put gold on this one for the main ribbon, and let's use some of the. So if you're going to use, if you use one section of ribbon to make a big bow hang on the bottom of your wreath, you could use the other sections of ribbon you've got to attach your cinnamon sticks. So, Nina, what colour should we use for your cinnamon? Red or silver?
Red, please.
Red. So we're going to get a bit of your red ribbon. So if you take your red ribbon, just snip it in half, and fold your little bit. Ribbon's quite thick. Fold it in half, and wrap it around a couple of your cinnamon sticks, and tie a simple knot. Like so, and then tie a little bow. And I'm not that good at tying bows, it's a very simple bow. Like that, and then you can then fix that to your wreath. So if you find this spot where you haven't got anything yet, and just push it into one of these strings on your wreath. Or if you've got some spare string left, you could tie it on. So I'm just going to poke that into there. So that's our bit of cinnamon. I've got some more cinnamon there, so we'll do a couple more. We're running out of space now to put the extra things on our wreath because it's getting quite busy. So I think we need to squeeze that in there. So there's our cinnamon on there. And then to finish it off, the last thing you want is you want a nice long piece of ribbon, bottom of your wreath, or the top of the wreath, wherever you want to put it on your wreath, but I'm going to put it at the bottom. So you want to tie a simple knot, and then tie it into a bow. I'm not very sophisticated at tying bows, so I just do a simple shoelace type knot because I'm not that good with knots, but even a shoelace type knot is fine. And that is your completed wreath, and the only thing you need to do now is to make a hanger so you can hang it from onto your door, or you could use one of the existing wires on the back of it, but that is how you make a Christmas wreath.
Well done, Mark.
I think yours is going to be the envy of the street, you know.